these are quality wide receiver ones. Now, again, we're not talking about the wide receiver one, but these are guys that if you wanted to anchor your receiving core with this next tier, you probably feel pretty good about that. And we will start with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Really just an outstanding talent.
We were all in on him, and he did not disappoint us. He had double-digit targets in well over 60% of his games. Was having that kind of, we called it the sippy cup role. It was very Cooper Kupp, the layup targets, going in the slot and dominating. Ultimately finished with 31% of his games as a wide receiver 1, 19% wide receiver 2. So half the time he was great. He did disappear at times when they got run heavy. The Lions did have that kind of, if they could ground and pound you, Dan Campbell wanted to. But in those shootout style games, when they had to lean on him, he actually got tackled at the 5-yard line 7 times last year. And he's not a big, strong guy. He's not your typical goal line threat. But that tells me he was getting that. Cooper Kupp's not necessarily a goal line threat, but would get those really nicely designed plays. And he got pushed out to one so many times. And you think about how many touchdowns Jamal Williams ended up with. If those flip and he goes in for 6 of those 7, we're talking about the wide receiver 2 and 3 of fantasy right now, not the wide receiver 8. So I absolutely love the role, love the player, love how set up he is in every facet of the game with those layup targets. There's nothing to not love about St. Brown, and I love round 2. Let's say I got Eckler. Like I said, there's only 2 running backs I have in round 1. It's McCaffrey and it's Eckler. Let's say I start with Eckler. Oh, man, do I want Amon-Ra St. Brown on that way back. I think he's a great follow-up. Or this next guy.
All right, well, let's talk about the next guy, Garrett Wilson. Reflexively, I raised an eyebrow, but I want to hear your case for him being this high.
Garrett Wilson's stats, you guys probably have heard these, but if you haven't, just buckle up for Wilson's stats with Zach Wilson versus without Zach Wilson. So with Zach Wilson, 8.8 fantasy points per game, on pace for 844 yards and 0 touchdowns. With anyone other than him, and again, 2 shit pumps. We're talking Joe Flacco, Mike White. I don't want to disparage Mike White. I like Mike White, but still.
Hey, Joe Flacco is a Super Bowl
yes,
champion.
Elite, right. True. But, yeah, no disrespect to them, but not even close to Aaron Rodgers' level of talent. And even still, Garrett Wilson, as a rookie, just stepping into the NFL, 17.29, more than doubled his points per game with anyone not named Zach Wilson at quarterback, on pace for 1,394 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 104 catches. I think that is a very reasonable projection with Aaron Rodgers, considering he's averaged 29.9% of his targets going to the wide receiver 1. Yeah, I know Adams was there, and of course Adams dictates the targets, but guess what? Rodgers has already said the way that he breaks out of his cuts and the way he runs his routes, Garrett Wilson, looks a lot like another number 17 I've worked with before. Already drawing those comparisons. He also then brought up Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb as just those guys that have that it factor, Rodgers said. Garrett Wilson has that too. Eli Moore is shipped away. I think this is going to be a 28 to 30% target guy from Aaron Rodgers, who we have seen make absolute monster wide receiver ones time and time again. I love Garrett Wilson. There's nothing this guy can't do. I'm a huge fan of him in round 2.
It's a convincing argument, and with Zach Wilson, without Zach Wilson, it's a compelling argument. And I don't doubt the guy's talent. I got to admit, my only hesitation is Rodgers, because when Rodgers is like, oh, he comes out of these breaks, I don't give a shit about anything he says. I don't believe anything he says. I think he's so disingenuous and such a bullshitter. Anyway, sorry, I'm slowing your list down.
No, it's a really fair point. That's maybe the one risk that could happen here is Rodgers just freezing him out, because that's just what Rodgers does to young talent. So maybe that could be. He did bring in all his boys. So,
all right, let's move on to number 10 on the list. There's a solid wide receiver 1 guy that you said actually had the same numbers as. Who do you have the same
AJ Brown,
as?
the exact same amount of fantasy points.
Brown.
They were exactly the same in points and points per game, because they both played all 17 games. We did see more targets go to CeeDee Lamb, 4th in targets, 4th in receptions. Similar to that Cooper Kupp and Amon St. Brown type of sippy cup. He really was in that slot, just getting peppered when he got kicked back inside. And I don't see too much of a reason why he won't do similar things. He had 47% of his games as a top 12 receiver, and 65% of them as a top 24 guy. Nice, steady consistency. The only risk and the reason why he isn't higher for me, in fact, he's probably one of my lowest drafted receivers, is one, I often see him going ahead of Adams, and I just can't do that myself.
The notion of him going below Adams or above Adams or Eckler is absolutely
Yeah.
insane to me.
So I do not have a ton of CeeDee Lamb given who he's going above and what that opportunity cost would be. But two, we also have Mike McCarthy coming out and saying he pretty much let go the most explosive play caller they've had in decades in Kellen Moore because he was passing too much and scoring the ball too much.
Oh,
He
sure.
wants to slow the pace down, does with Brian Schottenheimer, who comes in, who is only ranked above 17th in pass attempts once in his career. The highest he ever got was 13th. So he's always been in the bottom half of the league in pass attempts. He's consistently top 5 in run percent as well. And that's what McCarthy said he wanted to do. You also then mix in Brandon Cooks, a healthier Michael Gallup who's looking springy again. And so I think the target competition is going to be larger for a smaller aerial pie. So I did give him a slight downgrade compared to where he finished last year in CeeDee Lamb. But if he fell to you in mid-round 2, obviously you feel good about this guy. I just, as he's going right now, as a late first, early second, above Devontae Adams, sometimes even above Austin Eckler. No, thank you, not for me. So I actually don't have a lot of CeeDee Lamb, despite liking a lot about him. Love the player too, but there's enough red flags here that when I'm kind of picking these hairs, he's one that gets a bump down for me and somebody I'm not drafting as often.
No, I mean, sometimes you got great players in fantasy that are often hampered by things beyond their control. I mean, we thought DeAndre Hopkins was quarterback proof until Brock Osweiler rolled into town. We found
Oh,
out he
man,
wasn't.
that was the worst.